Have you ever sat across the table from someone, listening to them talk, and felt a little knot form in your stomach, like something's just off? Maybe they haven't said anything particularly wrong. Maybe they're even charming, funny, thoughtful. But your gut is whispering, pay attention. That whisper gets louder the older we get. After 60, we don't just date for fun or for drama like in our younger years. We date for companionship, for comfort, for someone to walk beside us in this new chapter of life, not someone to drag us back into the chaos we worked so hard to leave behind. You see, in our 20s and 30s, we could bounce back from heartbreak, from a bad decision, from a financial mistake. But after 60, the stakes are different. We've built something here. A life, a rhythm, a sense of peace. And one wrong relationship, one wrong man, can knock all of that over like a house of cards. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't about fear. It's about awareness. Because the truth is, there are certain kinds of men who, no matter how charming or accomplished they seem, bring a kind of weight into your world that slowly starts to chip away at everything you've built. Your peace of mind, your savings, your emotional well-being, even your physical health. I've seen it. I've lived it. And if you've ever looked back and said, "What was I thinking?" You know what I mean. So today, we're going to have an honest conversation. A heart-to-heart conversation about the 3 types of men who could cost you dearly after 60, and how to recognize them before it's too late. Let me tell you about the first one. He's the charmer. Oh yes, he's smooth. He knows just what to say, just how to look at you, just how to make you feel like the most captivating woman in the room. And at first, it feels wonderful. After all, we've gone through so much in life, raising kids, losing loved ones, working hard, sometimes going years without feeling truly seen. And here he comes, this man who listens, who compliments, who says all the right things. It's intoxicating. You feel younger, desired, alive. But the thing about charm is, it's not always backed by character. The charmer isn't necessarily cruel. He's just hollow. What he offers is surface. He'll flatter you, but he won't support you. He'll show up when it's convenient, but disappear when you really need someone. And worst of all, he'll make you question your instincts. You'll feel like something's off, but because he's so good at pulling you back in with a joke, a wink, a kind word, you'll ignore that whisper in your gut. I knew a woman named Rose. She was 68, recently retired, divorced for over a decade. She'd finally gotten to a place where her days were peaceful. She took long walks, drank her coffee slowly in the morning, finally got to her reading list. Then she met Alan. And Alan was a whirlwind. Flowers, poetry, spontaneous getaways. She said he made her feel like she was 35 again. But slowly, things started to shift. He borrowed small amounts of money, just a few hundred at first. Then he stopped showing up for their Sunday breakfasts, always with an excuse. One day he'd been locked out of his car, another day he had a sudden business emergency. Rose started feeling anxious, checking her phone constantly, wondering what mood he'd be in that day. And still, every time she thought about walking away, he'd say just the right thing. "I've never felt this way before. You're the only one who understands me." She wanted to believe it. We all do. But eventually she realized it wasn't love. It was emotional manipulation wrapped in sweet words and soft smiles. The charmer doesn't want to build a life with you. He wants to borrow your light. And when you start to dim from all the emotional confusion, he'll move on to someone else who will give him that same glow. Now, I want to be clear. There is nothing wrong with enjoying romance. There is nothing wrong with wanting to feel seen and loved. But what you want is depth, not dazzle. You want consistency, not charisma. Because your peace is too precious to hand over for a few compliments and kisses. And here's the thing most people won't tell you. It's okay to walk away from someone who makes you feel unsure. You don't need proof. You don't need a dramatic reason. If your body feels tense, if your sleep gets worse, if you're constantly second-guessing yourself, it's a sign. And your peace matters more than their charm. I want to ask you something. Have you ever met someone like that? A man who swept you off your feet but left you feeling more confused than cared for? If so, you're not alone. And you're not foolish. You're human. You were open, hopeful, maybe even lonely, and that's not weakness. That's courage. But what matters now is how you protect your heart moving forward. Because the second type of man is even more dangerous in a different way. He's not flashy. He's dependable, responsible, even generous. At first, he seems like the total opposite of the charmer. But don't let that fool you. He's the controller. He'll never yell. He might never even raise his voice. But over time, you'll find yourself shrinking. You'll cancel lunch with your friends because he doesn't really like them. You'll stop wearing that dress he said looked a bit young. You'll start asking permission instead of sharing plans. And it all happens so slowly, so subtly, you might not even realize it's happening. I had a friend named Margaret. Bright, independent, always on the go. She met a man through her church who seemed like a dream, kind, involved, a real gentleman. At first, he was supportive, encouraging. But then came the little comments. "You're always so busy, I barely get to see you. I guess your grandkids come first, huh? You're still doing that painting group? Thought you'd be tired of it by now." And little by little, she started fading. She stopped painting. She stopped traveling. She stopped laughing as much. Because every time she chose herself, she felt like she was letting him down. That's not love. That's control disguised as concern. And after 60, you don't need someone to mold you. You've spent a lifetime becoming who you are. Don't let anyone dim that. Real love after 60 should feel like a breath of fresh air, not a tightening around your chest. It should feel like freedom, not submission. It should make your world bigger, not smaller. You deserve to be with someone who celebrates your joy, not manages it. Someone who encourages your independence, not questions it. Someone who sees all that you've built, your family, your friendships, your passions, and wants to be a part of it, not erase it. Because your peace isn't negotiable. Your time isn't disposable. And your health, emotional and physical, is not a price you should pay for someone else's comfort. So take a breath. Look around your life. Listen to that inner voice. It's never too late to choose peace over pressure. And it's never wrong to protect your joy. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It's the silence of self-doubt, of walking on eggshells, of constantly wondering, did I say something wrong? That's the silence Margaret found herself living in when she stopped speaking her mind to keep her partner happy. And if you've ever quieted your voice just to avoid conflict, you know exactly what that kind of silence feels like. Now, the charmer might steal your clarity, the controller your confidence, but the third man, the taker, he can rob you of something even more dangerous, your security. The taker isn't always obvious. He doesn't come in asking for a loan or flashing a sob story. In fact, he might appear completely self-sufficient, even successful. But over time, his pattern becomes clear. Every gift you give, every favor you do, every ounce of energy you pour into the relationship, it's taken, not shared. And it's never enough. You'll notice it in small ways at first. Maybe you always drive to see him, but he never makes the trip to your side of town. Maybe you're the one cooking, planning, listening, supporting, and somehow it never seems to go the other way. You'll hear things like, "You're just so good at handling things," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." At first, it sounds like appreciation. But when you start to get tired, physically, emotionally, and realize there's no one holding you up in return, it becomes clear. This man isn't building with you, he's draining you. I knew a woman named Celeste. She was 72, widowed, with a calm, steady presence and a generous heart. She met a man at her volunteer group, a man who seemed thoughtful, a little reserved, kind. Over time, he shared that he was going through some financial difficulties. His pension was delayed. His adult kids weren't helping out. His house needed repairs he couldn't afford. Celeste, being the nurturing woman she was, began helping in small ways, buying groceries, covering a phone bill, picking up the cost of dinners. And every time she offered, he was grateful, at least on the surface. But the help became expected. He'd hint at his needs and go quiet if she didn't offer. He'd guilt-trip her about how lucky she was to have stability, how she didn't understand real stress. And slowly, Celeste started feeling responsible for him, like if she didn't step up, he might fall apart. That's the danger of the taker. He doesn't have to ask directly, he lets you fill in the gaps. He creates a story where you're the savior and he's the poor soul who just needs a little more time, a little more help, a little more of you. But here's what I want you to remember. You are not a retirement plan. You are not an emotional support service. You are not here to be depleted. At this stage in life, your energy is precious. Your peace is earned. And your money, well, that's your safety net. It's what keeps the lights on, the fridge full, the doctors paid. Sharing your blessings is beautiful, but being used for them is heartbreaking. And the taker can cost you in more ways than money. He can drain your health with stress, your time with his needs, your relationships with isolation. Because when you're constantly pouring into someone who gives nothing back, you're not just losing resources, you're losing yourself. Now, if any of this sounds familiar, please don't judge yourself. So many strong, intelligent women have been caught in this kind of connection. Why? Because you were raised to give, to help, to believe in second chances. And in the right relationship, those qualities are golden. But in the wrong one, they're a roadmap for manipulation. And sometimes, the most generous among us get hurt the worst. Not because we're weak, but because we lead with heart. And heart, my friend, doesn't always see clearly when it wants so badly to believe. So what can you do? You start by tuning in. Do you feel seen or simply used? Do you leave conversations feeling lighter or heavier? Are your resources going out faster than they're being replenished? These are not selfish questions. They are wise ones. Because the kind of man who costs you your peace, your money, or your health never starts with a red flag waving in your face. It starts with charm, with attentiveness, with shared laughter. That's why protecting yourself isn't about becoming cold. It's about staying clear. It means noticing the difference between kindness and control, between affection and expectation, between romance and responsibility. And it also means giving yourself permission to walk away from anything that asks you to sacrifice the calm you've worked so hard to build. Because after 60, life should feel more settled, not more chaotic. You've raised families. You've built careers. You've survived heartbreaks and transitions. You've walked through fire and come out stronger. The years ahead of you, whether you're dating again or simply exploring companionship, should be filled with joy, not second-guessing, with trust, not tension, with warmth, not weariness. So here's what I'd love for you to take with you right now, wherever you are, a quiet promise to yourself that you will never again give your peace in exchange for someone else's potential, that you will trust your gut more than their good intentions, that you will ask not just, "Do I love him?" but also, "Does this feel safe? Does this feel peaceful? Do I feel like me in this relationship?" Because at this stage, love isn't about sparks and suspense. It's about steady ground. It's about being able to breathe easily next to someone. It's about looking at your life and saying, "This man doesn't fix me. He adds to what's already whole." That's what you deserve, nothing less. There's something powerful about reaching the point in life where you finally realize you don't have to explain your worth to anyone. You don't have to chase approval. You don't have to entertain drama or tolerate control or rescue someone who doesn't want to rescue themselves. That power comes with age, and it's one of the greatest gifts of growing older. But sometimes, even with all our wisdom, we forget. We get lonely. We get tired. We crave connection. And that's completely human. Wanting love, wanting someone to share a meal with, laugh with, even just sit in silence with, none of that makes you weak. It makes you alive. What matters is how we protect ourselves in the process. Because love, at this stage, should never feel like a gamble. It should feel like a reward. Let me share something with you. I spoke with a woman named Ellen recently. She's 74, sharp as a tack, fiercely independent, and full of fire. She told me about a man she met online, a man who seemed polite, stable, and emotionally available. They talked for weeks. He told her he'd lost his wife a few years back and that he was looking for someone to share quiet mornings and meaningful conversations with. He said all the right things. But then one day, he started telling her about his business troubles, how he'd invested in a startup that was suddenly at risk of collapsing, how he just needed a little help to make it through. And Ellen, smart, kind Ellen, felt torn. She wanted to believe in him. She wanted to be the partner he could lean on. But then she paused, took a breath, and asked herself the question she'd learned to ask after years of experience. If I say no, will he still be here? So she said no. And you know what? He disappeared the next day. And Ellen? She wasn't heartbroken. She was relieved. Because deep down she knew. She'd seen the red flag and acted on it. She didn't wait for the situation to unravel her peace, her health, or her bank account. She trusted herself. And that right there is what this whole conversation is about. Trusting yourself, honoring your gut, protecting your peace. You see, we don't talk enough about how exhausting it is to constantly doubt someone. To stay in something because you're afraid of being alone, even when being with them is lonelier than silence. That kind of stress builds. It doesn't just weigh on your heart, it weighs on your body. It keeps you awake at night. It raises your blood pressure. It drains your energy. And over time, it changes you. You become more anxious, more hesitant. You start second-guessing your choices, apologizing for your needs, walking around like you're always bracing for the next problem. That's not love. That's survival mode. And no woman, especially not one who's lived through everything you've lived through, should settle for survival mode. So what does love really look like after 60? It looks like consistency. Like a man who shows up, not just with words, but with actions. Like someone who doesn't just tell you what you want to hear, but who listens to what you need to say. It looks like quiet dinners and shared laughter and someone who respects your boundaries, your schedule, your solitude. Someone who doesn't try to fix you, change you, or take from you, but who simply adds to your already full life. And yes, that kind of love is possible. I've seen it happen. I've seen women in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s find beautiful, mature partnerships. Relationships where there's mutual respect, support, and ease. Where love feels like coming home, not like stepping into a storm. Where both people have space to breathe, and where laughter outweighs stress. That's what I want for you. Not fantasy, not fairy tales, but something real and grounded and good. And maybe you're not looking for love right now. Maybe you're enjoying your own company, and that's beautiful too. But if the day ever comes when someone new walks into your life, I hope you remember this. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. You don't owe anyone the comfort you've built, or the money you've saved, or the calm you've earned. You get to choose. You get to ask hard questions. You get to take your time. And most of all, you get to walk away from anything that feels wrong, no matter how long it took to build, no matter how afraid you are of starting over. Because the only thing worse than being alone is being with someone who makes you feel alone. So if you're watching this and thinking, I've been there, or I see it happening now, know this: you're not broken. You're not behind. You're not too late to make a different choice. Every single day is a chance to choose differently, to listen to yourself more deeply, to honor the woman you've become, and to remember that love, when it's real, when it's healthy, it never asks you to abandon yourself. If this conversation touched something in you, I'd love for you to share your story in the comments. Maybe you've dated a charmer or a controller or a taker. Maybe you've walked away. Maybe you're still in it, trying to figure things out. Whatever your experience, you never know who you might help by speaking up. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life for more conversations that matter. We're building a community here, a place where wisdom is celebrated, voices are heard, and no one has to go through life's challenges alone. Because here's the truth: age doesn't close the door on love. It just opens the door to better choices. So go out there, live boldly, love wisely, and most of all, protect your peace. You've earned it. Every single bit of it. Here's to calm waters, kind love, and the brightest chapter yet.